All right. Do we want to get started?
Ready to rock and
I
roll?
think so. Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
Great. Love it. Okay. Well, I'll just quickly tell y'all who I am. My name's Colleen Baldry. I'm a growth marketing specialist here at Movola. I help plan the webinars, execute the webinars, and I just pretty much introduce whatever cool people are here and tell you what they're talking about. We have Louis Bagdonis here. You guys probably know him. He's a senior program manager for MSPs at Movola. He oversees a lot of MSP experience stuff. So when they're onboarding and they're having any questions, learning how to implement Movola, he's for a lot of people the guy they talk to. In Matt's case, that's who helped Matt's team on board. So that's how he knows Louis. And then we have Matt Clark. He is a VP of operations at CNWR. He helps businesses turn technology chaos into clarity. So we're so happy to have him here. He's one of our partners who's been through onboarding with Movola, and he's gonna tell us what that was about. So take it away, fellas.
Cool. Thanks, Colleen. And
Sure.
I will get my screen out of there. And we'll try to keep an eye on the chat and the questions throughout. So please throw them in. As Colleen said, I did onboard Matt and his team. So, Matt, you don't have to be friendly. You can rip me to pieces all you want. I want to make sure it's a helpful session for everybody. And we appreciate you taking the time. We know y'all are busy and you got a lot going on. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for the introduction, Colleen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Anything else you want to add about yourself or CNWR?
So yeah, I mean, we're from the Northwest Ohio area. Stereotypical MSP. So, we do a decent amount of projects, I would say, for our size of an MSP. And yeah, I mean, we have around 30 employees. I think that's pretty relevant for handling projects and stuff. You want to know how big other people are when they're using these types of platforms and such. So, but yeah, I mean, we're pretty regional. We don't do a ton of nationwide stuff, but we definitely dabble in, working with remote hands, on-site hands, all that kind of stuff too as well. So.
Yeah. When you say a decent amount of project work, how would you define that? Like 30, 50, 60, 100, 200 at the same time or
So, and you know the answers to all these, so I can't lie to you. But yeah, I mean, I think we have around 20 to 30 active projects right now.
Yeah.
And I'd say, yeah, it ranges in between probably 20 and 40. And honestly, I feel like that's a lot for the size of our project team.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and somebody just threw a question in there, how big of a project team do you have? And I think that's probably something we'll get into a little bit too, how that project team has changed
Yeah,
a
yeah. So
lot.
I'll give you a quick short answer to that, but then I think we're going to elaborate on that quite a bit. Right now, my project team is 100% devoted technicians.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. So I think what we'll try to do today is follow like the life cycle of Movola just for everybody here. So, starting with why change, why take on another tool when you have probably a lot of tools already and you're managing tools for customers, and why add another thing to your stack. Then we'll talk about the onboarding process. I'll give a little bit of an overview. I will try not to talk too much because you guys are here to hear from Matt anyway. And then we'll talk about kind of what we just alluded to. How did Movola help the professional services and dedicated project team? So first and foremost, Matt, what prompted CNWR to look for a project solution?
Um, I'd say inconsistency. We always handled projects. So when we started this journey, we didn't have a dedicated projects team. So we would have ebbs and flows of churning through projects, making sure that we were getting the work done, and then we would have to jump back into business as usual, handling our clients and their managed services and day to day functions. So we would dabble in spreadsheets, you know, swim lanes, Trello, all these kind of things that we would try to dabble into. And there were like pockets of success there, but very often it was met with like slipping timelines and real bad communication, bad communication was a big thing for us for sure. So we were looking for something to solve that problem. So
Okay. And like, what did I think what would be helpful for the people that are here today was there like an inflection point, right? Like and I know it's going to be different for everybody, but did your organization get to a point where there was enough project work going on where you couldn't keep doing it that way? Or like, was it number of employees, or like, was there some sort of tipping point when you were like, all right, we've got to do this differently?
yeah. And I can answer this question while answering a question from the chat real quick too. So we are a managed shop, manages our ticketing system, and so that was another thing is like the built-in tools inside of Manage, they leave a lot to be desired, and they know that and they're working on that. So good for them. Um, but what we were running into was we had tried out project managers on our side, and they were struggling. We have an internal project management resource, so they would dabble over. We bring them over. Hey, can you try to help us like make this process better? They would try, but they didn't really have the tools to make that happen. So that's why we would dabble into what they're using. Like we would use Trello, we would try to operate on how they run projects, and that wasn't working out. It's still we were running into issues, and communication, templates, all those things were lacking for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't honestly, I really don't think that there was really a tipping point.
Okay.
Um, Techs were getting burnt out frequently because
Okay.
of how we would have to like really dive into this to get through the backlog. So
Yeah.
that was what we
Yeah.
saw.
What I think what would be helpful too, if you just clarify a little bit on when you say we had an internal project management resource, was that like somebody that you guys were using outside just to come in and kind of do some contract work for project management wise, or was that your dispatcher or service delivery manager that was stepping into that role? How were you guys handling that?
Yeah, so both. Both, I guess. We had a
All of
dispatcher.
the above.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had a dispatcher that we tried to dabble into it. We're also lucky we have like a little bit of a dev presence inside of our company, and they have a project manager. We tried to get them to assist with that stuff in their free time. And I mean, really, the inconsistency of a resource dedicated to that too showed problems too. But really, it was the fact that like we just had a lump of tickets, you know,
Yeah.
and it was, hey, can you manage this? No dependencies, no, yeah, it's just a lack of understanding as to how we can go from here's a lump of tickets to how are we going to get through this? What's the process? Like, how are we going to handle the milestones? All those kind of things that have gotten a lot easier. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like where it's like you get handed a pile and it's like, okay, where do I start, right? And by the time you spend the time to dig through the pile's already gotten bigger from all the incoming projects that are still happening. So,
yeah, 100%. So we would have those conversations about like, oh, well, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like, okay, but how do you eat an elephant? And then another elephant and then another elephant. Like, so it was never ending.
I feel like there's we should probably say, how do you eat a cow?
There you go.
And right, and then like the cow turns into a herd. So Colleen, Kate, we're coming up with terrible marketing ideas here for you. I am at least. Cool. So I think that's helpful, right? Any questions y'all have about how CNWR came into Movable and decided that. I will say, I think I'm not on the sales side, but I talked to you guys a little bit in the pre-sales process. I think you guys did a great job of having a lot of detailed conversations with our team and understanding the tool and like, all right, how does like you're using a couple other tools to help with time tracking and things like that. So how would this play into it? And you guys did a good job of really diving into the details of like, all right, if I like, how is this going to sync and how is that going to sync? So definitely a fully vetted process. I'm seeing another question pop in here. Do you have engineers that are dedicated to project work, or do they share their time on service tickets? And if so, how do you do resource projections based on the anticipated time they work on service tickets? And I think you touched on this a little bit, and that's something that changed. So maybe just give an overview of before Movula, did your techs work projects and service tickets?
Yeah, so I mean, you saw us go through this journey, um, because we were split. So we were trying to do exactly what you're saying, where it's like, okay, well, we're gonna spend this resource is gonna spend 10 hours of, you know, 10 hours a week on project work. This one will spend 30 going into all those things. Man, we had Excel sheets to handle that and how we would talk about, what can sales sell next quarter that that we can actually fulfill and close on so that we can bill it. That was a disaster. That whole setup and the whole way of handling it was honestly a disaster. And it came to a tipping point where I went to a peer group meeting, and I was going over the problems that we were having. And this was pretty much, I'd say, the first like 4 weeks of us going through Movilla, because we had every intention of onboarding every single one of our engineers into Movilla. And every single one of my peers was saying, yeah, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. You need to split your team into a projects team. So I do think it's an inflection point, that you reach. And I mean, honestly, you should be able to look at how many hours of project work you're working each week and decide if you have enough project work to justify an engineer. That's relatively simple to look at. Sure, you can break it down into a better way of handling that statistically, but when it to make it really black and white, it's just, do you have that much time? Do you have 40 hours a week to justify a whole resource? So yeah, we looked at it. We realized that we had roughly 100 to 150 hours on average a week. So we split out 3 bodies, and that was how we handled it. So yes, we have 3 engineers that are 100% project work. Um, I would like immediately after making that change, we track like project kill rate and stuff. Immediately after making that change, it was like 60s, 70%. So you could tell that we were like getting buried by projects. It was like 250%, 300%. So it was when you make a change like that and it works out well, that was amazing. Like, and it, so we were going through the process of onboarding Movilla. So they were also very critical in like creating project templates, making sure that all that stuff was followed. And then they're the 3 sources of truth. And honestly, when you're using Movilla, it's a lot easier too if you have dedicated resources. So
Yeah.
that made it way better to use too, for sure. So
Yeah. Yeah, and somebody threw a question in there, do you still get, so now you've got the 3 dedicated project engineers, do they still get pulled into service tickets when the service desk gets overwhelmed?
no, they don't. Yeah, we totally split them off. Honestly, it's the opposite that we're having right now. So like if there's a project that, and I mean I think everyone's different on how they define a project, but like we'll have a project for just a new workstation. I would assume that's pretty unanimously a project. And if that new workstation is like, we hate to operate on this like critical firefighter type of thing where we just have to go do it right now. But the reality is it happens every single day in our business. It's just how it is. And every once in a while, if there's a big problem like that and we know it's just like a quick fix, we will pull someone from service delivery to go work on that project. So it's the opposite, as kind of what we're seeing right now. But I think that really depends on your project load. Like we have gone the lean mean mentality on that side. And that's just because we, swapped over to there, but we intend to add more resources to that team. So sure, if you are on that tipping point, you add that other resource. If you're pulling them from service delivery, yeah, I 100% could see that you would, need to balance those roles. So right now we're lucky and that's not our case. So
Yeah. Do you think, not to go away from projects too much too, but do you think that part of that is probably how you manage your service desk as well? Like if an issue comes in, service desk needs to manage it, and maybe if it's at a certain point where it's like, hey, I think that this might be a project, right? It's going to be taking a lot more than we initially think it is.
Yeah, 100%. Like we track things like touches on tickets. So, and this is dynamic based on how you run your service desk. I've heard some people say like 15 touches on a service desk ticket. That seems insane. That seems really high.
I don't deal with service tickets at all projects, and that
15 touches seems high.
feels like a lot. Yeah.
But like we'll say anything above 3 hours or 5 touches, it probably justifies we should look at it and see if this is going to be a project or if we're just doing things in the wrong direction. Like
Okay.
if we need to justify, if we need to figure out a better path forward. So, I mean, we're technical people. Everyone wants to solve these problems. They're not doing it because of anything like malicious. They're just like, I know the way, I think I know the way to solve this problem. Let me solve this problem. And then they're like 15 layers deep and they're super deep into that. So I feel like that's pretty easy to get into on the service desk side. And real quick, just to like elaborate more on the how I think you should handle this from the project side. I think when you're it's a lot easier to handle on the project side because service delivery, there's just this they ask you answer mentality around like you just got to respond and you have an SLA. The project side, you're able to sell into that. So when you're selling that, you can tell them this is our timeline. We're 4 to 6 weeks out. Like so when you're going into this, you can just um, not lie about it, but tell the client that like you have an artificial timeout. So like you might not be 4 to 6 weeks out, but you can tell them it's 4 to 6 weeks out. Once you get that backlog, you can look at how much is in your pipeline and you can say, oh, like I have enough in my pipeline that if I were to add a project resource right now, that there's enough out there that I would still honestly have a backlog, but I would be able to justify their salary. So that's the process that we are going through, and that process has gotten a lot easier with Movilla, honestly, too. So,
Yeah, and it's if you look at that backlog and to your earlier point, right? It's pretty straightforward math, right? If you're able to say the project team is dedicated, we're not going to pull them off service tickets. And I will also say that for people that I've interacted with, like when they draw that line, they make a hard stance on it and they say no, like project team works on projects, you cannot pull them into service desk. Like, and they just draw that line and they keep it separate. And it ultimately works itself out. And to your point, if you're firm about it, then you say no, they can't work on service tickets, it doesn't happen, right? But if you let it be like, well, yeah, they can come in and help you on it and this, that, or the other, then it's going to keep going on forever.
yeah. So, I mean, we're still growing in this realm. Like, I mean, you know this. But we are, I was having a conversation just last week, another thing driven from a peer group. So pro tip, quick shout out, I would join a peer group if you're not in one. Is that like, we don't have our buckets split in accounting. So I can't directly tell you without doing a bunch of legwork, how profitable the project side is, and I think it's really important to know that too. So there's two things. I can say like, okay, well, hours wise, how much is out there type of thing. But you need to make sure that the your project resources are different than your service delivery resources. You need to make sure that your projects are still profitable. So the last thing you want to be doing is, selling labor hours and going through these things, and you think you're fine, but you're selling into a pit of like super low margin. So yeah.
Get another question in there. How far in the future do you do resource projections? And they're saying we would like to do 6 months.
Yeah. I wish I could do 6 months. That sounds fantastic. So, I mean, I'd say honestly, we're doing like 6 weeks right now is what we're doing for resource projections. So, I mean, we look forward to next quarter. But really that relies on good data. Like, so we have to, we're massaging that data right now in terms of like our forecasting and pipelines. So sure, I can tell you 6 months from just what we have from already sold projects, but I also need to tell you 6 months out from like what's in the pipeline from a sales side. And it's both of those sides of the road that we're struggling with right now. So I'd say we are accurately able to say how much work we have in the next like 6 weeks. So
Yeah, and that's something that your team did a great job of. If when you came in and you started working on your templates, you were like, "All right, here's our I forget what y'all call it. I should have looked it up. You call it like your project. Is it project initiation or what do you call it? Your project, or is it just project management? It's
yeah,
your
we just do like project planning and project
yeah,
management.
that's right, project planning. And in that planning, to what Matt was saying earlier, is you guys built in your 4 to 6 week backlog. So like here's when we close a project, here are the tickets that are going to happen at the beginning that cover that duration. And because you have that built in your templates, you can then look at when the different execution pieces are going to happen.
Yeah. So we're still working through that. And just to like talk a little bit about the template stuff.
Yeah.
Like honestly, I think that was one of the best pieces of the Movilla onboarding. When we were like testing this out, talking about it, I had a demo at a different peer group, to keep saying that. And a lot of the people in that peer group were like, wow, yeah, it was a great experience. But they were telling me that you had to have everything templated. And sure, I think that everyone should believe that because I think it helps. But that's not the case, honestly. But if you go into it with like before we were using this tool and before we were using Movilla, we were using templates, I'd say about 50% of the time at most. We took this time through the onboarding process to build out our templates, and that has been really the tipping point. Like we have, I mean, I think I'd say 100% of our projects are now by template because we always import them. If we don't have a template, we build it at that time. Like
Yeah.
that's just part of the process now, and that's been the big step in project maturity. That's been huge. So
Yeah, and at least some sort of template applied, right? Like we understand,
yeah.
you might be going out and selling custom something or the other. So Chris asked another, or Christopher, excuse me, asked another question. Was it a Movable peer group or an MSP project manager peer group?
It was actually a dairy farm peer group, just a bunch of like working with cows and stuff. No, it was an MSP. It was just an MSP peer group. So I'm in like a COO peer group. And like, I just went there last week. And they were speaking to that a little bit. And then I was in just a standard, like, it's just a group of MSPs that are working with a outsourced company for like business consulting. And there was a demo at that time. So yeah.
There are farm. I did learn this. There are farming peer groups.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's like whole farming, I would love to do that. Just focus on farms as an MSP. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, actually, here, Colleen. Here's my fun fact. I read an article this morning about a new meat processing plant that they're building in Nebraska. That's like they're trying to take on the big four of Tyson and National Beef and all this sort of stuff. Um, so that wasn't really a fun fact, but there's a new plant out there. So maybe you could go find business there. They might need. I mean, it's a brand new plant, so they've got some cool stuff in there. Um,
So
Colleen,
glad you shared that. Thank you, Liz.
you're welcome.
Smiled in my face.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah, and to your question there, Christopher, too, I do know there's definitely some more operations focused MSP peer groups out there. I do know of a couple of project manager specific peer groups. So if you're looking for some of those, we'll make sure we get my contact information out there and I can let you know what I know is out there. Okay, you already are. Perfect. Sweet. So I know we've bounced around a little bit, and let's stay on the topic of kind of your project and professional services evolution with Movable. I know we've already covered, how's your team changed, some big improvements using templates, big changes there going from 50% to 100% templates. Can you talk a little bit more about how you've measured success, Matt? I know you talked about your kill rate on projects going way up. Any other metrics or KPIs or ROI that you guys have measured? And is it over a 3 month, 6 month, forever time period?
Yeah, so we just started Movilla in Q3 slash Q4 last year. So I'd still say that we are on the finding out phase of this, but we do project CSAT, so that's a big thing. Like, we try to make sure that we like CSAT's a tricky one. I always try to, when I'm going through like project closeout process and stuff, to manually reach out to the client to make sure that they know that, because I think this is going to be a problem that like a lot of people run into is, when you close out a project from the customer's point of view is totally different from when you close out the project internally. So don't just close that project. A lot of people are using like CSAT tools like Smileback and stuff. Don't just close out a project, and then expect the client to fill out that CSAT, because from their perspective, that project closed out like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. So it's better off if you reach out to them and you say, and don't implement automation to do this, but like, reach out to them and say, hey, I know that you were working with our team last week and they got this all wrapped up. We're wrapping this up from our side internally now. So you should be seeing a survey come over. We'd appreciate it if you fill that out. Yeah, your engagement's going to go double on that. So our project CSAT response rate is higher than our service delivery response rate. And I'm not going to manually reach out on every single service ticket that we close, but we do it on the projects. So yeah, that's how that works out.
I think what's a good point there too is just like the act of reaching out. Like a lot of people will just do the project and close it out and never say anything to the customer, right? And then customers, we all know how they are, right? They might come back in like 2 months and they're like, "Hey, whatever happened with that firewall?" Right? And you're like, "Oh yeah, we installed it. We finished it a long time ago," right? So just the act of like calling or emailing and saying, "Hey, we completed that work. Does everything look good on your end?" I think is even a big step just to for everybody to take.
Yeah. Percentage of projects closed past due, percentage of projects closed over budget, um, amount of hours that we do like a trailing 12 weeks hours over budget just across all of our projects, to see like, are we overselling this or not? Um, that's a debated topic, honestly. Like it really depends on how you are structuring your projects. Um, but how we structure it, though, we don't account for those hours in terms of like scoping and such. So when we see that like we're way or a decent amount under budget, that's not as much of a red flag for us. And we're looking to address that, but right now that's how it is. So, um, yeah, I think that those are really the big things. So
Yeah.
we track like how many hours we're working a week on projects just in general to make sure that it's consistent, and that our utilization is relatively high. Um, and then with all of those things put together, I think we're able to get a relatively decent picture of how are we doing on the project side? Are we still closing things? Does it make sense to bring someone else in? So, I see a question in the chat about like who's responsible to track and maintain the schedule updated for any project, the engineer slash implementer or the project manager. So I will just be crystal clear that like right now that is that's a work in progress, and essentially a shared resource right now. So, we have a project lead that's one of those three individuals. We're able to use Movilla to manage the projects well enough that as long as we don't hit hiccups, that things are perfectly fine and dandy. And then myself plus that resource plus a little bit of our dispatcher come in and massage that stuff out for scheduling. So we sat down and we recognized that we have enough project work. So like I think most companies will say 10 to 20% of the overall hours on a project. That's what they're selling for project management uh, on those scopes. So if you're doing, I guess I don't know, 300 hours, 200 to 300 hours of work, you can probably justify that project manager. Like, so we're just now into that realm, and we're looking to hire a project coordinator at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, you guys have done a good job of looking at that creatively, honestly. Right? A lot of people will be like, okay, we've got to get somebody in there. And what we see a lot in the MSP space is it's hard to find a project manager in the MSP space that understands the MSP space. You get people that come in from the outside and they have a hard time adjusting, and or you take an engineer internally and have them be a project manager, but they prefer the engineering stuff, right? Common issues that everybody sees, but you guys have done a really creative job of being like, all right, we've got like this one engineer who's going to do a great job at that. He's going to have some of those responsibilities on the ops side. You'll take some of that on too. And you guys just do a really good job of maintaining your project plans and updating them so that it works.
Yeah. So we're at the point now where um, it's enough. So every time that we run into a roadblock or like a hiccup, we're like, we got to update the template. So we're constantly adapting on the template side. But yeah, it's reaching the point. I mean, you'll know when you need that person because you start to reach that point and your resources are like, I don't have time to update the templates anymore. That's a good that's a good red flag that like it's time to bring someone in that I mean pretty much their job is to triage templates and engage clients. So yeah, I mean we because honestly I truly believe that because of the onboarding process and the fact of like if you implement a tool correctly, then you will spend a lot of time like digging into that tool and developing process around that tool. We have this fleshed out to a thing where like I mean I follow the process every single time, where I have a checklist and I run through it every single time on how I import and I mean we were just having a conversation earlier today about like hey we need a KB of just this right now it's foundational knowledge and just it's kind of a no-brainer because we don't have like 100 project templates but a KB of every single project type and the templates that like the phase templates and stuff that we're bringing over for that. Like, so we get to the point where we have enough process around this that now it's a no brainer for us to bring in a resource. And their job is going to be so much easier. It's not just like you're throwing in a resource and you're saying manage all these projects. It's hey, this is how we do all this stuff, and they hit the ground running. So that's Movilla has made our life a lot easier in that regard because we felt not forced, but like I mean, kind of forced that we had to go through that stuff to truly use the tool better. Like so.
Yeah, and I think that's a good call out, right? And just to circle up a little bit on what our onboarding process looks like is if you're on the call here and you're in the pre-sales process and you've been told that our onboarding process is 10 to 14 weeks ish, depending on what you guys decide to go with. A lot of people are like, what? Like, I just want to plug this thing in and go. And it's not the case on projects. And you mentioned something earlier on, Matt, too, about like, you're before you were trying to manage the day-to-day stuff and do the projects. And I think resonates across any industry is like projects just don't get attention in any industry. And a lot of people expect that the folks doing your day-to-day operations, which at an MSP is your managed services, can just take on that extra workload of projects. And I think that recognizing that, hey, we need to separate this out, and then we need to have that process is a good thing. And so when we get into the onboarding process at Movila, we do like to spend a lot of time to make sure that that process is there. And even if it is like the day-to-day people, like to your point, how are you going to set up the project every time? And are you using the templates? And, force is a strong word, but you'll probably vouch for this. Like we get to a certain point in onboarding, and I'll be like, I don't really want to go further and train you on anything else unless you're going to start using templates on your projects. So why don't we spend a couple extra sessions and build out some templates?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely a couple sessions where we came to the board and it was like we didn't do our homework. Yeah,
Which happens, right? I mean, like your day-to-day business doesn't stop because you got another tool going in, right? And we get
yeah,
that. We're
yeah,
flexible for sure.
yeah.
Um, but
So, but
yeah,
now that we've really jumped into using it, it makes a lot more sense. You know, like we're living by it now. And it's very it's just how it is now. It's become second nature to just work through it that way. So it was a big culture shift though, in terms of how we were handling projects, that's for sure. So
yeah. So as far as that culture shift, I know you're always going to have champions and skeptics when you bring something new in. What would you say initially was the response from your team when you told them that you were going to bring another tool on for projects?
So we were very much all on board with knowing that we needed something.
Okay.
So there's times where we are like very fast to make changes. And then there's times where it's like, oh, are we really sure that this is the way to go for this? And with projects, it was with projects because we were having like pockets of success. We were under the impression of like, is it really that bad? Like every once in a while, it's like we're just rocking it. So maybe it's just how do we harness this for consistency? Um, but it got to a point where everyone knew that it was such a problem, um, that it was more so like it was a rallying cry and people were like, we need to figure out a way to solve this. And I saw Movilla, we looked at it internally and everyone was like, yes, this is it. We're bought in. So
Yeah.
we were very lucky. I don't think that there's going to be like a across the board way to handle that. What I would say is like try it out internally. We had like 3 people or 4 people that were
Mhm.
on those first calls. I brought everyone that was going to be involved in the onboarding from I think our dispatcher, our service delivery manager, and our project lead, and they had different names at that time. I brought them all in, and we started going through the onboarding. Now in our life of using Movilla, dispatch isn't using Movilla right now, and service delivery manager is also not even using Movilla. But it was important to me, and I think to them, that like we all knew how to use the tool and what it looked like. And that, I mean, that definitely helped with onboarding. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you, I mean, I think too, just for some other folks that are on here, as far as getting into the tool and clicking around, how long would you say it took your team to feel comfortable in there in Movila?
Hmm. It'd probably be a lot faster now that the UI looks better. So there's that. um, I honestly just get comfortable with the tool. I'd say like 3 to 4 weeks,
Yeah.
like a good month of using the tool. It's a lot. If you're not familiar with like general project management and you're just like an engineer, there's a lot of knobs to turn and stuff. I mean, it's essentially like, a well-crafted giant Excel sheet. So those can get tricky. But with the onboarding process, it breaks it down into like, we're just going to I stop looking at all the shiny things. We're going to focus on this piece of it right here. So that definitely was helpful. But the flip side of that is like when you're going through an onboarding and like you're focusing on the little pieces, every once in a while, your brain is like, well, what's that? Like, let me check that out. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, now I have like 50 questions. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks, and then we were able to like actually start using it day to day. So
Yeah. Any of those knobs that you found harder to turn than others in the platform? Any different any components or pieces of it that you found more challenging than others?
yeah, I mean the whole like dashboarding and utilization. I mean, like because of the fact that we had split resources for the first 3 months of basically using the tool, those were honestly just not great. It's because it doesn't reflect. Yeah, that just not a great experience. When you have dedicated resources, it's just so much more clear. And I mean, we're still going through some of this stuff, just
Yeah.
transparently. Like, I think like our next step is I really want to get our like solutions design process integrated into this more. Like we've been talking about that, because that is, where our next step is sales engineer, solutions design, like project pipelining. If we can get them to use Movilla for that, then we'll have a true idea of when are we actually able to fulfill this project. So our sales team is excited for that. We just need to like hammer that process out, make sure that we're doing it the right way. So
Yeah, we'll say you guys, your team has done a great job of focusing on, like you said, those small pieces so that you don't get too distracted by the shiny things. And for those of you that are customers or on the call, you'll hear me say it all the time. You need work estimates, durations, dependencies on your tasks, and then all those shiny things will start to light up for you, right? In Movula. And to the earlier point of forcing you, because it's so easy to find out how much doesn't have that in the platform, it's pretty easy to see quickly, like the shiny things aren't going to provide you any benefit. So your team did a great job of focusing on that. And then, we got through all the formal onboarding training, but then at a pretty regular cadence of, I'd say like every 4 to 6 weeks, you would email back and be like, all right, hey, so now that we've got our critical path lined out, we want to look at putting all this stuff on the calendar using the smart schedule. Can we review that? And it would be like, knock that out. And you're like, okay, got it. Like crystal clear. But because you had that base built, like you could just keep layering on. And then I think like 6 weeks later, you're like, okay, now that we've got that, like we like want to build out capacity more. And then to your point, the latest one has been like, how would we get solutions design in here?
yeah, it's all about friction. Like whatever point is the biggest point of friction is where it's like, okay, we need to fix this. And honestly, Movilla, I guess that's how it's a great tool, because it's like we know that we can use it to solve those problems. Like, so when we were talking about, we're presenting these timelines to our clients and they're just flat out like unrealistic. They're not lies, they're just not based on anything that like actually exists, you know? Because sure, I can tell you we're in a backlog of 4 to 6 weeks. Like, where's that coming from? Just touch and feel. So when we're looking at using the smart scheduler and stuff and like just booking out people's time, first of all, if you have dedicated resources, that experience is a lot better. But second of all, like if I have dedicated resources and I have them, essentially I can see their utilization. I don't have to schedule them out entirely. I can just see that like they're overutilized for the next 3 months. Like, so if we're going to sell that project, either we need to talk about like changing priorities of projects, and communicate that, or it's going to be pushed out for 3 months. So that's been helpful. Yeah. I mean, so that's the reason that we're trying to leverage the sales cycle into there, is because first of all, we have built all these project templates inside of Movilla. It doesn't make sense for those templates to live in two places. If the sales resources slash solutions team can just use those templates, then we have one single source of truth. Like I'm not updating calculators across the board. And they're able to figure out like based on the project team is keeping these templates up to date. I should be able to see like the latest and greatest of how long it's going to take us to do this project for sure. So,
Did you find, I think that's an important piece too, because this is something that we always have to focus on a lot in onboarding is how long it's going to take, right? Like everybody, for the most part, understands quantity of hours, what are our budgeted hours. Understanding duration and how long things are going to take is always a little bit different. Did you find that it took your team time to get used to that, or was it like, okay, this helps us a lot because now we're not overloading stuff, and sure, it might only take an hour, but that hour is going to be spread across a couple days.
Yeah. So I think that helps management and sales to understand how long things actually take. Because I can tell you that this process only takes an hour, and then your immediate feedback is, why isn't that done? But the reality is that it's 4 15-minute sessions of back and forth
Yeah.
over the duration of a week.
Yeah.
Like, so that has been very nice to show people, like, look, we tell you it takes a week because look at these last 3 projects. It actually took 2 weeks, like, or it took a week. Like, there are those hiccups and snags that you run into that I think it's very easy to say, well, we sold a 40-hour project. That should be one person doing it in a week. Why can't they just get it done? Like, that's just not reality. So yeah, it's helped clear that up. I think that if you're an engineer, um, that makes sense to you. You understand it. Well, first of all, you think it takes less time, but you understand that, like, it takes a while to do it. Like, it's going to take me like a month to do this. But if I were to tell you as an engineer, you would, how long is it going to take you to do this thing? You'd be like, oh, it'll take me like 3 hours. No, it's probably going to take you 6 or 12. Like, but they understand that, like, I have to work with the client on this. It's going to take me like this amount of time because it's just back and forth and like waiting and those kind of things. So, but I definitely think it's helped with management and sales and just understanding reality of how long things take. So,
Yeah, being able to show sales like here it actually is. Like here, I understand you think it should be 1 week, but this is the reality, right?
yeah. Real quick, like, one of the cool things that we started to do is every time that we onboard a client, we send them like a timeline, and honestly, it was all based on hopes and dreams of like what we would be doing for the client through the onboarding process. So we do like onboarding, and then we do like remediation, and that's how our process is. So we would have, you know, a written document that we would go over with them that would tell them, like, week 1 we're doing this, we're coming on site, we're onboarding devices, do a meet and greet type of thing. Week 2 we're implementing these tools, and it would break that down. When we started using, and I would do that manually every single time. First of all, it'd be wrong, just all the time. Didn't matter how much it was always wrong. And then it took me a lot of time, mainly because I hated doing it, but secondly because I was just like, I have to bounce this back and forth off of my team and like, hey, is this sound good? You think we can actually hit this? It's all like touch and feel. Um, the first one that we did after onboarding Movilla, I imported it, and then I was like, all right, like, it literally tells me the end date. It tells me every single day that we're going to do this based on like, we imported the template, has all the dependencies. It's like, now I mean, there was a part of me that was like, I'm about to just like screenshot this and send it to the client. Like, didn't do that, but yeah, I mean, that was great. I love that so much. That saved hours of my time. So that's been
Yeah.
super great. So
Yeah, it's like if you tap to your, I keep circling back, but the backlog of 4 to 6 weeks, right? Like if you push that out, it's a lot easier to tell the client that and call them and be like, hey, we're actually gonna be able to pull forward instead of being like, hey, we know you signed this contract 4 weeks ago. We're not gonna start for another 2 weeks, right? It's just a lot easier to have all that right there for you. And to the point of you guys starting to look to pull solutions engineers in, you used a term that I've been using a lot is light PM work, right? So getting that solution engineer, you've got all the templates there ready to go so that they know what it is, right? They can do a little bit of light PM work. And then when that project gets handed off to you on the operations side, you know how they got to it. So, yeah.
yeah, 100%. So,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a lot of like that light PM work that goes like unknown. I mean, like massaging finances, like dealing with all those like nitty gritties of project management. I think that a lot of people don't capture that into the projects, and it makes it seem makes it seem like your projects are more profitable than you realize. Like,
Yeah.
and once you want to know how you build out a team, to like actually commit good on projects, you start capturing all that time. You make sure that you are getting paid for that time, and then you get other resources to fulfill that time. Like that's just that's consulting 101, I guess.
Yeah.
And this has definitely helped us see that. But it's also cut out a lot of time because we're spending way less time like building out projects inside of Manage and such. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, honestly, it pays for itself. And if you would have asked me that in Q3 before we signed on, I mean, transparently, I was like, I don't know about this. You know, this is, do we really need this? Like, I feel like we're doing an okay job, but now I'm like, yeah, this is a kind of a no brainer. Like, so
Yeah. But that's projects. I mean, like that's what everybody always thinks. Like, no, it's projects. Like whether, they got to start and end. We'll knock them out. They'll be done. But like as you spend time on it and dig into it, it's a lot more than people give it credit for. So we got a question in there. We're coming towards the end of time here. Does the timeline definition help you drive accountability and engagement if there is a dependency that requires something the client to do something by a specific time?
yeah, and I'd say that this is something that we need to that we're working on implementing, but haven't gotten there yet. Is the whole like assigning tasks to? So just as a heads up, they're called tasks, not tickets, inside of Movilla. But assigning tasks to the client, like that is functionality inside of there. We are not doing that, but yeah, it definitely helps. Yeah, like we are able to say that, hey, this process normally takes us a week, and it's now past due, and we're still waiting on it. And it's always client, it's access. Like they're supposed to send us access to something that like there's just no unless I go over to their desk and like we literally sit through and us getting access via that way. There's no way I can help push that forward. So we're just waiting and waiting, you know. So that's that's definitely helped, because we're able to see exactly what pieces of it go past due, and it's definitely helped with budget too. Of like, we weren't really setting accurate budgets on those tickets slash tasks, so we weren't understanding what part of the project is going underwater. So
Yep.
yeah.
Cool. I know we've got 5 minutes left, so we'll leave it open for a couple questions. We'll any other questions that you guys want to throw in, let us know. Colleen, I'll hand it over to you to wrap it up here.
Yeah, any last minute questions, throw them in. I got a couple things to share with you guys. Next month our webinar is planned. We're going to have, let's see, Daniel Clarkson, yes, with
Yep.
Mainstay Technologies. He's going to be talking about the best practices of building templates. So if you guys liked what Matt had to say about templatizing, you're curious what are some of the best practices of building templates, tune in next month. We'll be putting that sign up soon. Anything else? Maybe I'll see you at ChannelCon. You can wear my hat if you want to. And we're also going to be sending up, but you like this hat.
No,
We're
you
gonna
don't
be
wear other people's hats. That's like hats,
Oh
ear
yeah.
socks, like that's a no-go.
Fun fact, Lewis has special shoes for hotels. Just so
Yeah,
there's a fun fact for the day.
hotel
Of
rooms are
germs, apparently.
disgusting. They're the grossest places ever.
Yeah, totally. Well, you could feel that way, Lewis. I love a good hotel. Anyways, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording if you want to send them out. And we'll also be letting you guys know about some communities or peer groups that we know of. So if you're looking for anything like that, we're going to help you out, and we'll be making a blog about it soon. Anyways, that's all I have. Any other questions? Shoot them out. I'll send out Lewis and Matt's information afterwards too with the recording. And thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate having you all.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. We appreciate you taking the time. We know y'all are busy.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you, Matt.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. You rock. Tell Jason we said hello.
Okay, I will.
Cool. All right. See y'all.
Thanks, everybody.